This week, phone hacking and dodgy journalism threatened to topple the British arm of one of the world's most powerful media empires. But does that mean Australia needs a broad-ranging media inquiry? The government and the Greens seem determined to use News Corporation's travails to put pressure on its Australian arm. One media inquiry is already underway, there's talk of another, and now the government's flagged redrafting privacy laws. Critics fear it's an overreaction, as political editor Chris Ullman explains.
Everyone loves a good inquiry.
Did you say sorry?
Britain has a multi-headed cracker humbling an almost mythical media baron.
This is the most humble day of my life.
Given Rupert Murdoch's Australian roots and reach, the rumble for a media inquiry here is growing.
A conversation is starting about the need for a review.
A full inquiry.
A media inquiry.
It's a wish that lacks focus.
What do you want the inquiry to look at?
Well, I wanted to look at the protection of privacy in Australia. I wanted to look into the hacking laws. I believe we should be looking at the concentration of media ownership in Australia.
Those key issues around diversity in Australian media and just who is reporting the news versus who is trying to control the news.
But there's no doubt about the target.
Wanting to see News Limited answer some hard questions.
The Daily Telegraph is probably the worst of the examples at the moment.
The hate media.
To date, there's not a shred of evidence that shows News Limited has engaged in the phone-hacking invasions of privacy that have crippled its British cousin.
Do you believe there is corruption in the Australian media?
I haven't got evidence of that, Neil, and I've said that all the way through, but I do think there needs to be a review of the media.
The key complaint of the government, some independents and the Greens is that some or all of News Limited is biased.
But the Daily Telegraph is interested in distorting the debate, is interested in demanding an election campaign purely intended to try and get rid of the government.
There is already a Commonwealth review into the regulation of the broadcast media as the functions on our televisions, mobile phones and computers converge. But the politicians seem to want something more. It's just not clear what, when so many issues and grievances have been conflated.
I think if we're going to have an inquiry, we have to first work out what we're going to inquire into. One issue, of course, is media ownership. Another issue that seems to be going around is political bias in the media, or sections of the media, parts of the media. And the other issue, of course, coming out of the UK experience and the Murdoch issue is privacy law.
The government's now pulled out a 3-year-old recommendation from the Australian Law Reform Commission that there be a national law to allow people to seek redress for breaches of privacy.
I think there is sufficient public expectation that the government consider these recommendations in light of what have been, of course, some very reprehensible forms of behaviour in terms of invading privacy overseas.
The Coalition agrees with looking at privacy laws, but not a broader media inquiry.
So I think that's a useful discussion, but having an inquiry into wicked journalists at large, I think, is probably just a waste of time. And, it's clearly a political stunt by the Prime Minister, who's feeling a lot of heat at the moment and trying to distract attention.
Some of the privacy concerns raised by our politicians are already covered by existing law. Hacking phones is a serious crime, and other invasions have other protections.
Clearly, we want our private information protected from misuse and disclosure, and we have quite good controls on that. And we have a very clear law of breach of confidence, which would protect the disclosure of people's private information and give a remedy if it is disclosed. I think we have a gap in terms of protecting people from harassment and intrusion out in the public sphere. But I tend to think personally that we'd be better off just dealing with that rather than having a wholesale privacy action.
And any move to protect privacy has to be balanced with long-cherished freedoms.
I mean, this is the thing that you've got to weigh up. It is a balance between the right to know, the media's, the freedom of the press, which I guess now means the freedom of the media, and free speech. On the other hand, people's right to privacy. And where is the boundary? And is it different for people who are in public life as opposed to people in private life?
And the law may well stumble in the wake of a world of blogs and Twitters.
Quite frankly, it's almost impossible to regulate and restrict information now. as the UK courts have seen, where they've been issuing super injunctions, that is, they are injunctions to even stop the press reporting that there is an injunction in place, they become quite useless when Twitter reveals the identity of the person that the injunction is trying to suppress.
Maybe the simple answer is to follow the Prime Minister's recent advice.
Don't write crap. Can't be that hard.
But it's harder than it looks, particularly when your beat is politics.
To paraphrase the Prime Minister, if the media writes crap, presumably it's often because politicians talk crap. So I think that the pot shouldn't be calling the kettle black.
Political editor Chris Ullman.